Hello and welcome to this talk. My name is Andrew and I've been a London Blue Badge guide for over 40 years. This talk is another one on the theme of considering the unusual, quirky or even odd things you can find on the streets of London, if you look carefully in the right places. This time we discover ghost signs, street art and unusual wall plaques. There will also be some street furniture, several old shops, and even a few windmills. Let's begin on Regent Street, looking north towards Oxford Circus. Many of you, I'm sure, will have walked along here during a visit to London's West End, but have you ever wondered what it looked like over 100 years ago? Here is that same view of Regent Street in a colorized photograph. The date is not recorded, but there are clues. The first from the yellow and pink posters that advertise Botticini concerts. That's these ones here, which were at the Prince's Hall in Piccadilly. Giovanni Botticini was known as the Paganini of the double bass, and he gave annual London concerts from 1860 until his sudden death in 1889. The second clue is from the Tilling knife board horse bus on the right. That's this one here. The knife board is the way the passengers sit facing outwards. A type which came into use from 1875. So this photograph was taken between 1875 and 1889. Regent Street was completed in 1825. And it soon became a highly fashionable shopping street. But see how muddy the roadway was. All the buildings you see here had been rebuilt by 1927. But to help you link with how it looks today, look at the Hanover Chapel in the distance. That's this one with the two curious towers on either side of the portico. This was one of the first of the original buildings to be redeveloped, and that was in 1896, and its replacement, Regent's House, is now occupied by the Apple Store. Here is another familiar view, looking down from Trafalgar Square to Whitehall, with Parliament's clock tower in the distance. There it is. The statue in the centre left, that's this one here, is of Charles I, made in 1633 by sculptor Hubert Lesueur, and the first time an English king had been sculpted riding on a horse. It was moved here in 1675, taking over the site of the medieval Charing Cross that had been destroyed by Puritans during the Civil War. The statue looks down Whitehall towards the banqueting house. There it is, outside which King Charles was publicly executed in 1649. Compare this view with this daguerreotype is the oldest London street photograph, taken in 1839 by Monsieur de Sainte-Croix. The process had been perfected by Louis Daguerre only months before this was taken, using a silver-plated sheet of copper. The identity of Sainte-Croix and how he could use Daguerre's new system remain a mystery. The buildings seen here at the top of Whitehall have almost all been demolished, with the sole exception of the banqueting house. So there it is, just there. Although the replacements survive from the later years of the 19th century, allowing the smaller scale at this end to contrast with the huge government offices further down the road. The exposure to obtain this photograph took several seconds, and although there are people in it, some images are blurred by movement. A hansom cab driver is perched on his seat by the lampposts on the right. So there he is, but these ones are a bit blurred. And there's some other figures just here, sitting next to the bollards beside King Charles, one wearing a top hat. There also seems to be a cat on the rooftop just there, although it's almost hidden by this black blob. This plaque is set into the pavement behind the statue of King Charles, and it identifies something else important about the location. This is the point to which mileages from London are measured. In 1290, the Charing Cross was raised here, a carved stone memorial to the wife of King Edward I, placed at the central crossroads where 5 major routes into London meet. This spot began to be referred to in legislation, which might be specified to take effect within a certain distance of Charing Cross, and as a result it has become a point marking the centre of London. A replica of the Queen Eleanor's Cross was put up in front of Charing Cross Station in 1865, but this was the site of the original cross. Milestones on the main roads into London often state they are so many miles from a certain landmark at the entrance to London, often referring to a landmark such as Marble Arch. Charing Cross may be the centre point for London as a whole, but the ancient city of London, founded by the Romans in about 50 AD, has its own claim to a central mark of Roman origin, so predating even a medieval stone cross. This is the London Stone in Cannon Street, seen in the setting renewed in 2018, which was based on drawings from 1820. The stone was first recorded in a property deed from 1100, at which time it was apparently used as a public place to formalise the completion of contracts or bargains and the payment of debts. In 1189, the first Mayor of London, Henry Fitzaulwyn, lived nearby, and he was described as of London Stone. During the Wars of the Roses, Jack Cade and his rebels broke into the city. In Shakespeare's play Henry VI Part 2, he has Cade strike his staff on London Stone, exclaiming, "Now is Mortimer lord of this city." There is a depression across the top of the stone, and it may be that striking the stone had become a part of the mayor's installation ceremony. So the stone's a little bit hidden away in the shadows, but it's just there. More common markers on the street of London were the parish boundary marks, usually now in the form of cast iron markers set high on a wall, and not stones like this ancient one dated 1794. So there's the date just there. This one is in Druid Street, Southwark, and it defines the boundary for the combined parishes of St Olaf and St John Horselydown, which are cryptically indicated on the stone. So O for Olaf and I for John. It's directly opposite the former site of the St Olaf Parish Workhouse. When this stone was freshly carved in July 1794, that was the month for some extraordinary events. Britain had recently declared war on France, and Nelson lost the use of his right eye in action during the invasion of Corsica by combined British military and Corsican irregular forces. As France struggled to avoid civil war, the Reign of Terror came to an end with the arrest and execution of Robespierre. In London, there was a catastrophe when a barge of saltpetre ignited, causing a huge fire at Ratcliffe that destroyed 400 houses and 20 warehouses. Turning to London's more recent commercial history, you've probably noticed a few faded signs on prominent walls. These are usually called ghost signs, but sometimes also called fading ads or brick ads. Painted commercial wall signs are a very ancient form of advertising, with examples found at Herculaneum and at Pompeii, such as over the workshop door of Marcus Basilius Verecundus. This Hovis sign is at the rear of 553 Green Lanes, Hornsey, where Crisp & Co., their name's on this sign but it's a bit difficult to read, were bakers and confectioners, makers of Hovis the Golden Brown. It is a good name to start with on ghost signs, as Hovis are far the most widespread brand advertised in them, and there are 22 examples recorded across London still in existence. For more on these, look online at the History of Advertising Trust website. This sign at 1A Dulwich Road, Herne Hill, ends with an intriguing offer. S. Errington, dealer in antique and modern furniture. Furniture bought, sold, or what? Note the use of the different fonts here, a style characteristic of advertising signs in the late 19th century. A 1969 photograph explains how this sign has survived in such good condition. It was covered for years by an advertising billboard. Incidentally, the missing word here is most likely exchanged. Perhaps you guessed it. Warings from London Wall had their shop at 32 to 33 London Wall in the city. Established in 1874, Warings sold ladies' underclothes and baby linen made either at this factory in Shepperton Road, Islington, or brought in from Londonderry and Strabane in Ireland. Other lines advertised were white and coloured underskirts, natural wool underclothing, corsets and embroideries. The company was dissolved and ceased trading in 1916, which shows just how long-lasting the ghost signs can be. But as time passes, signs are being cleaned away or lost from redevelopment, so it's worthwhile looking out for them while some still remain. 18 Monmouth Street in Seven Dials is a street laid out in the 1690s, part of a development over slums and open fields by Thomas Neal. Benjamin Flagg's business as a saddler and harness maker must have been located here to benefit from being close to Aldridge's Horse and Carriage Repository, a horse and carriage market on the site where the nearby office block Orion House now stands. At that time, Covent Garden was the centre in London for coach building, so this is a reminder of the importance for horses and carriages before the invention of motor vehicles. This building is part of the Komin-Ching Triangle, named after the firm of architectural ironmongers based here from 1723, which eventually occupied the whole block. This was, despite the name, a British company. Comin was from Northumbria and Ching was from Devon. The company finally moved out in 1978, but it does still exist at Bury St Edmunds. The ghost sign on number 18 has been restored during the 1983 renovation of this block. Let's now take a look at street art. Chalk drawing has ancient origins, but the first drawings to be recorded on pavements were Madonnas, drawn in the 16th century by Italian travelling artists, known as Madonnari. In the 19th century, British pavement artists, or screevers, yes, they really were called that, were a familiar sight. George Orwell's 1933 book about poverty, down and out in Paris and London, describes his encounter with a screever named Bozo. And in the same year, here we have playwright Bernard Shaw stopping to look at the work of pavement artist John Bentley near Embankment Station. In more recent times, chalk drawing on pavements has experienced a revival, a notable English artist being Julian Beaver, who in about 1990 began working as a street performer, then as a pavement artist. While working in Brussels, he became interested in anamorphic designs, that's ones that give an impression of 3 dimensions on a flat surface, and he has since been commissioned to produce designs in Europe, the United States, and Australasia. Street art on walls instead of pavements is a difficult subject, and many take the view that graffiti is vandalism. Spray paints had become available by the late 1960s, and this new tool for street art began mainly with slogans. Tagging with a pseudonym of the artist soon followed. Curious slogans from the early 1970s include Eat the Rich, originally coined by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, but there were some weird ones such as "Cats like plain crisps," and "Beware the thunderous trowel surgeons." Yeah, well, you tell me what it means. This "Clapton is God" was painted at Drayton Park, shortly after guitarist Eric Clapton held concerts at the nearby Rainbow Theatre in Finsbury Park in January 1973. The slogan's notoriety was boosted after the photograph appeared with a dog urinating on it. Graffiti of this period has been recorded by Time Out photographer Roger Perry in his book The Writing on the Wall, which preserves its, otherwise, brief existence. A book of graffiti was also collected by Nigel Rees and published in 1981. Banksy has made a big impact on popularizing street art with his quirkily humorous stencil paintings. His first was a 1999 mural in his hometown of Bristol. This one in London from 2011 is "Shop Until You Drop," set high on the wall of a 1960s office at 25 Bruton Lane, as you can see from the inset view, just there. Notice how the shopper's shadow appears on the wall behind. This stencil has survived intact so far, protected by its height above the ground. London has become one of the most pro-graffiti cities in the world, and although officially condemned, street art has a large following, and official authorities have occasionally welcomed it. When Banksy began painting street art, he usually adopted the approach of American Admiral Grace Hopper, who said, "It's easier to ask forgiveness than it is to get permission." Here is street artist Dan Kitchener at work in Shoreditch. He usually signs the word "dank," there it is, as shown on the smaller inset painting, which is from the hoarding previously on a development site at Park Street, Croydon. You may notice in these pictures the influences on his style of Japanese art and of the film Blade Runner. There's a lot of street art to be seen in London at Rivington Street, Shoreditch, at Brick Lane, Whitechapel, and at Leek Street, Lambeth, but you might find the Dulwich Outdoor Gallery more appealing. At the corner of Shoemint Road and Bellenden Road, Peckham, SE15, is this painting by Walter Kershaw from 2014. It's based on the painting in Dulwich Picture Gallery called "Landscape with Windmills Near Harlem," dating from 1650, by Jacob van Ruysdael, but without the Spitfire. A painting which John Constable greatly admired and also copied. This is part of the Dulwich Outdoor Gallery, a collection of street art in South London with works often based on the paintings at Dulwich Picture Gallery. The Outdoor Gallery was born from an idea in 2011, when Ingrid Beasley from the gallery met street artist Stick and invited him to visit the permanent collection of Baroque old masters. While they were there, Stick sketched some of the full-length portraits, reinterpreting them in his simple figurative style, and then he said, "If you find me some walls, I'll paint them." Talking of windmills, did you know that London has some real examples? Abraham's Mill, Upminster, is one of the best remaining English smock mills, built by James Noakes, a local farmer, in 1803. The earliest smock mills were used to pump water, and there was a line of mills on the embankment on the west side of the Isle of Dogs to pump groundwater into the river, giving that stretch of the riverbank the name Millwall. The light upper structure of a smock mill made them particularly suitable for soils with poor load bearing. Flour was produced at this mill until 1910, although it continued to grind animal feed until 1934, finally closing because production was no longer economic. Essex County Council bought the vacant mill with its outbuildings, most of which they demolished in 1960. Subsequent repairs have enabled the mill to be opened to the public in 1967, staffed by volunteers. The windmill is currently managed by the Upminster Windmill Preservation Trust, who provide regular tours and school visits. It's open on selected weekends from April to October, and it participates in London Open House Weekend in September. Vertical windmills first appeared during the 12th century, and the earliest reference we know is from 1185 for a mill overlooking the Humber at Weedley in Yorkshire. This photograph shows Shirley Windmill near Croydon, a tower mill built by Richard Alwen in 1854 to replace a post mill here that had been destroyed by fire. The brick tower is painted with tar to keep the interior dry, but other materials used in its construction may be from an older mill at West Ham, and the date 1740 is carved into one of the beams. The cap at the top of the tower is the only part that turns, so that's this part here. Its direction automatically adjusted by the spinning fantail at the rear. Alfred Rayson ran this mill in its later years, milling animal feed until it finally closed down in 1892. The windmill was restored in 1927, and more work was carried out in 1935 after one of the sails was blown off. Open days are listed on a website, usually one every month. Wimbledon Windmill was built in 1816 as a post mill on a brick roundhouse, but on being repaired in 1892, the post was found to be rotted, so the middle stage was rebuilt as a smock mill. The mill was restored in 1957, then again in 1975, when the first floor was fitted out as a museum. With a grant from the Heritage Lottery Fund, the sails were restored to working order in 1999, and the museum was extended to the ground floor, with exhibits showing the development and construction of windmills. Displays include a collection of millwrights' tools and model mills made by the curator. Wimbledon Common tea rooms are nearby, be warned. Several other vacant and derelict mills also exist around London, but with no public access at present. Returning to smaller items on the streets, this sign dated 1668 shows an armed knight representing the hero of medieval romance, Guy of Warwick. See the GC there? This means Guy Comes or Count Guy. It's on the corner of Newgate Street at the north end of Warwick Lane in the City of London. The location links this to the Beauchamp family, who claimed Guy as their ancestor, so this coat of arms is the Beauchamp coat of arms. And this was once the site of their London house. The Beauchamps were powerful English aristocrats who held the title Earls of Warwick until 1445. Guy's story was first recorded in the 13th century, a fabulous tale of his battles with dragons and with the giant Danish warrior Colbrand, saving the kingdom and winning the hand of his ladylove Felice. Her name means happiness. The story of Guy was very popular in England and France during the 17th century when this sign was made. The bottom and top of this site, that's above this line here and below that line, were added in 1817 when it was restored by J. Dakes. So here's J. Dakes, architect. The Boy of Panmure Alley sign, shown in this old photograph, is still in the City of London today, just beside an entrance to St Paul's Tube Station. It's dated August the 27th, 1688, and the verse refers to an old argument about whether Ludgate Hill, where this is higher than Cornhill, where Bank is, stating, "When ye have sought the city round, yet still this is the highest ground." The pannier which gives its name to Panmure Alley is a reference to bread baskets, like the one the boy is sitting on. This sign is thought to have been from an inn named the Pannier Boy, and it was rescued when the site was rebuilt in 1901. The new building was occupied by Farrow's Bank, which used it for advertisements. Also in the city, a narrow alley runs between Cornhill and Lombard Street, named Pope's Head Alley. The name refers to the Pope's Head Tavern, which was in a prestigious stone-built house built originally for a Lord Mayor and acquired in 1318 by the Bardi Italian bankers, after whom Lombard Street is named. By 1415, part of the house had become the Pope's Head Tavern, briefly renamed the Bishop's Head after the break with Rome in 1540. It was later frequented by Samuel Pepys, who came here in 1662 with his wife and Sir William Penn, writing in his diary, "Went to the Pope's Head and ate cakes and other fine things." This jovial beaming Pope in the shape of a keystone was made when the new Lloyds Bank headquarters was built here in 1930, and although it's not signed, it may be by Gilbert Bayes, who produced other bronze sculpture for this building. On the opposite side is a frieze of beehives, a symbol used by Lloyds before 1773, although it may perhaps also refer to the Beehive Tavern. Turning to street furniture, we pass a huge variety of manhole covers as we walk through the streets of London, but frequently overlook them. The selection of types gathered here gives some idea of the range and interesting designs made in the past. Also, if you were to apply for a job with Microsoft, the application form may still include the question, "Why are manholes round?" Think about it. The manufacturers of these cast iron covers frequently cast their names into the design, such as Hayward's at Borough, Whitehead & Co. at Great Quebec Street, and T. Sampson at Euston Road, to name a few examples. Have a look for yourself at manholes next time you walk down an old London street. As for the answer to the Microsoft question, a round cover cannot fall through the hole. In 1995, Bethnal Green's City Challenge commissioned local sculptor Keith Bowler to make 25 roundels set in the streets that would celebrate the area's history and cultural diversity. This one in Brick Lane refers to the garment industry, featuring a relief design of scissors and buttons. Other designs feature match girls, a weaver's shuttle, and reels of thread, beer mugs, a henna stenciled hand, Jacob Adler's violin, and a shopper's purse. The designs were made in cast iron by Hoyle & Sons, a traditional family-run foundry in Cambridge Heath Road. Some of these roundels have since been removed for various reasons, but look out for the remaining 14 when you are next in that neighbourhood. One most frequent item of cast iron street furniture is the pillar box, introduced from 1852. The first post boxes were painted green, but this was later changed to red since it made them easier to see from a distance. Most post boxes are marked with the monarch's cipher, indicating their age, and in England there are more than 400 recognised designs or varieties of pillar box, as well as 160 styles of wall boxes. This example at the bottom of Gray's Inn Road is a double aperture pattern pillar box installed from 1899 at locations with a high volume of mail. The apertures were originally designated for either town or country destinations, and each part has its own door for separate collections. The locks for the pillar boxes are all individually made high security types, so each lock has a different key, and you may have noticed the postman clearing a box carries a huge bunch of keys. This box is marked E7. There it is, for King Edward VII on the main body, but the door on the right was damaged and it's been replaced by an older one. The Queen Victoria double boxes were marked with the ciphers on the doors, but that was changed to the main body for Edward VII, which is why this one has 2 ciphers on it. Here is another pillar box from the reign of King Edward VII, in this case sited at the corner of Priory Walk and Drayton Gardens in South Kensington. The pattern for this type was introduced after 1904, when the door was enlarged to include the posting aperture, so the old doors finished here, but this one now goes up there. And this new arrangement was to prevent letters from becoming stuck at the top. As you can see, the curious feature of this box is that it was installed too close to the adjoining plane tree, and they are now in an unbreakable embrace. A similarly hugged box at Cardiff has been taken out of use because the door can no longer be opened safely, so the future prospect for this union is not good. Another item of street furniture is the telephone box, although the number of these have drastically reduced with the arrival of mobile phones. These kiosks in Carey Street behind the Royal Courts of Justice show 2 different types. On the right is a K2 box, designed by Sir Giles Gilbert Scott and first installed in 1926. The post office needed a robust design that would withstand the British weather, so the kiosk is made of cast iron with a durable hardwood door. Scott's detailing was inspired by the work of Sir John Soane, and he obtained permission to climb on the roof of Dulwich Picture Gallery to look at Soane's designs there. The K2 design was intended only for use in London and a few major cities, and only 1,700 were installed. By 1935, the telephone network had expanded hugely and more kiosks were needed, but the K2 design was too big and too expensive. Scott was asked to come up with a simplified, smaller design, shown here on the left. This pattern was called K6, or the Jubilee kiosk, since it was first installed during the Silver Jubilee year of King George V. This unique example of a K2 can be found on the west side of the entrance to the Royal Academy at Burlington House in Piccadilly. This one is made of wood, so it has to be kept under cover. This is the prototype K2 prepared for the 1924 competition. To test the 3 competing designs submitted, wooden mock-ups were installed behind the National Gallery. In addition to this prototype, there are 224 K2 kiosks remaining in operational use. It's easily identified by the crown-shaped ventilation above the word telephone, and by the regular size of all the glass panes on the door. Although the appearance of K6 kiosks remained similar during their production, there are small differences for the crowns just under the curved roof. That's this part here. I've added inserts with enlargements of these to help you see the variations. The original pattern had a Tudor crown, that's this one here, but this was changed after the accession of Queen Elizabeth II in 1952, and the pattern was changed to St Edward's crown, since the Tudor crown pattern was obsolete. However, the use of the English crown was most unwelcome in Scotland, and Scottish nationalists objected to its use there, blowing up the first pillar box installed in Scotland with an English crown. After this, K6 kiosks were made with a slot for the crown, so the Scottish crown, shown top left, there it is, could be slotted in. Can you see the lines for the slot just on either side? You can see this is a Scottish crown because of the oak leaf decorations on the arch. A programme of modernisation in 1985 resulted in widespread rearrangement of these old kiosks. But after this, some Scottish crown boxes ended up in England. There are a number of these in London, such as this red one on the left in Shaftesbury Avenue. See if you can find others. By 1960, when the K6 pattern was withdrawn, 60,000 K6 kiosks had been installed, of which it is estimated 11,000 remain in use. K2 and K6 kiosks are now designated listed structures, so their continued survival and maintenance is protected. From street furniture, let's take a look at shops on the London streets. Many shops are pleasant enough, but if you want to take a visitor somewhere special, Twinings at 216 Strand is a good one to visit. The most English of tea companies, this was founded in 1706 when Thomas Twining bought Tom's Coffee House. The company is still trading at the same shop today, and Twinings Tea has used the same logo, the name in capitalized font beneath a lion crest, continuously for 230 years, which makes it the world's oldest unaltered logo in continuous use. Twinings now sell over 200 teas in more than 100 countries worldwide, and the original shop houses a small museum showing the history of the company, and it also has a tea sampling bar. Pollock's Toy Museum at 1 Scala Street, Fitzrovia, is the oldest toy museum in Britain. Housed in two adjoining 18th and 19th century buildings, the collection originated with a shop in Hoxton in 1851 that was acquired by Benjamin Pollock in 1877. In 1956, BBC journalist Marguerite Faudry set up the museum, which is now run by her grandson. The shop at the museum entrance sells some of the traditional toys that were once an essential part of any child's play, including toy theatres, spinning tops, wooden and tin toys, soft animals, and many other treasures. Fox's shopfront at 188B London Wall in the city was rebuilt in 1937 by E. Pollard & Co. in this Art Deco style. Thomas Fox began trading from here in 1868, selling and repairing umbrellas, the steel rib type having been perfected by Samuel Fox in 1852. The regular use of an umbrella, considered unusual at the time, is attributed to the philanthropist Jonas Hanway from about 1750, but he would have had a bulky type with struts made of whalebone. This shopfront has a magnificent facade of vitrolite and chromed steel with internal fittings in Canadian black walnut. Sadly, in about 2000, Fox Umbrellas decided the shop was unsuitable for their business, and they closed it, switching to mail order from their workshop at Sutton. The shopfront is protected by listing, so when it became a wine bar, only some grills were replaced with a suitable sign for fine wines and spirits. Here is the old Lloyd's Dairy at 42 Amwell Street, Islington. The original signs in gold lettering against a white background read Dairy Farmer, Lloyd & Son, High Class Dairy Produce. Some original dairy fittings also remain in the shop. The signage was installed for dairyman Lloyd in 1921. Just as agriculture began a downturn with falling prices and a difficult time for farmers. Dairy farms were not so badly affected, and Welsh dairy products had a good reputation for quality. My photograph was taken in 2011, and the organic grocery seen here has since been replaced by BHC hairdressers. The paint colour now has changed to a brighter hue, but the glorious Lloyd & Son signs remain. This ancient building is the old Curiosity shop in Portugal Street near Lincoln's Inn Fields. This photograph was taken in 1907, at a time when the straw boater was a very popular choice for men's headwear, as you can see. The occupiers of the shop were Gill and Durant, waste paper and paper stock merchants, and they were successors to H. Poole, who also dealt with waste paper and was established in 1857. When this photograph was taken, the shop also sold stationery, and this postcard was most likely bought there. Charles Dickens's novel, The Old Curiosity Shop, had been published from April 1840 in 88 weekly episodes in the literary periodical Master Humphrey's Clock. It is suggested that Dickens intended at the start merely to write a short story about a little girl being lost in London, but his story just grew. The age of this building is unconfirmed, although details of its listed status suggest about 1660, when Clare Market nearby was established, although the date 1567 has long been painted on it. The shop was occupied from 1868 to 1877 by a bookseller and bookbinder named Tessiman, who had the painted sign added to encourage business. In 1883, the shop was discovered to be in a serious state of disrepair, and it would certainly have been demolished if it had not been for the Dickens attribution. Journalists wrote about it, and the news soon reached America that the Old Curiosity Shop was to be pulled down. Crowds of visitors began to arrive, and the shop was saved. American actress Mary Anderson showed considerable emotion on visiting the shop, and she gave the proprietor a free ticket to the Lyceum Theatre for as long as she was playing there. The shop was saved by the huge interest shown in it, and over the next few decades it became London's most photographed property, a required place to visit for any tourist. The shop today is owned by the London School of Economics, and the tenant sells designer shoes. No matter whether there is a connection with Dickens or not, this building is a unique survival in London, and it has a fascinating history. So that's the end of my talk today. I hope it's alerted you to some of the most interesting and curious things to find on the streets of London. Do have fun looking out for yourself for other things like these when you walk around. And as ever, thanks for listening. Finally, if you'd like to take part in one of my London walks, please look at my website, guidedlondonwalks.com.